Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and I'm pretty excited about tonight's show. We have Jacques Vallée, and he'll be on. Later on in the show, we'll have Alan Silverman on, and we're going to be talking about a great new film. I had the chance to watch it, and I think it is absolutely excellent. So that is called Witness to Another World. Witness of Another World, pardon me. And it's coming out, I believe, in just a few days. And I'm just going to tell the listener it is a great film. We'll be talking about that today with both Jacques and later on with Alan Silverman. And Alejandro is not on the show today. I just didn't have, he was actually on the road. So I just took this opportunity and to run the first 30 minutes or so with my great guest. He really doesn't need introduction, but as I say almost every week, we do have a lot of new people listening to the show. I'll just put it this way. Jacques is my number one choice for any guest that I'd ever want on the show. So I am that excited about it. And I'm just going to introduce you. Jacques, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm humbled by that introduction. Sometimes I joke that I'm the only ufologist who doesn't know what UFOs are, because I've studied, as you know, a lot of cases going back to working with Dr. Hynek, of course, and also working with people in France and in Europe. I don't have a favorite explanation. Obviously, the outer space extraterrestrial explanation is always a possibility. It's always there, but I've occasionally made enemies by pointing out there were other things that the phenomenon did that didn't match any hypothesis we have yet, which is where science takes over. I mean, that's why it's interesting.
I think that's true. I remember when we met in Phoenix, we were in line together at the hotel, and I said to you something along the lines that I've been doing my show for a number of years now, and I know less than I did about UFOs than when I started. It just seems like it's such a mystery, and I really like that you don't have any one explanation, and that's kind of the benefit of doing this show, is hearing people's ideas, because that's really all they are at this point. Is just ideas.
Well, we see new ideas, fortunately, but we also see new pieces of data, new phenomena that are being uncovered as more and more people become involved, and that's how research functions.
Right. For now, you had a sighting very early on in your life over in France. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and just kind of give? Go ahead.
This was the year after a major wave over Western Europe in 1954. I was about 16 at the time. This was during the summer vacation. Very clear afternoon, sunny afternoon. I was helping my father with some work inside the house, and my mother was in the yard tending to the yard, and she saw it first and called us, and I rushed out, and I saw essentially a disc that was something like half a mile away, I would estimate, close to, and I had a reference as a church needle, that was very, very clearly about half a mile away, and the object seemed to be in that vicinity above the church. The next day, I spoke to a friend of mine from school who lived another half mile up the hill from me. He had seen the same thing and had looked at it with binoculars. So he had three witnesses. It looked like a shiny disc with a dome on top. Pretty much what so many people have described. And at the time, we didn't report it. There was no real place to report it. And we thought that it might be a prototype of something that would eventually become known. And of course, that never happened. There is no such there is no such craft in existence flying around today.
Right, right. That's one of the arguments you hear a lot as far as, people will talk today about seeing, for instance, the Nimitz UFO case, the Tic Tac UFO. People will say, well, that's military. But these things have been having this same type of behavior, going way back, as you know. And, that's one of the arguments you never hear too many people talk about, is that, these strange craft doing unbelievable things have been around for a long time. And, one of the things you hear about the most, or I don't want to say the most, but you do hear a lot of, is the triangle UFOs. And there's cases that go way back. I just spoke to someone recently that back in the 1970s saw a triangle. It was her words, not mine. So it's not like they're a new model that comes out, but the discs sure seemed like most people were seeing back in the day.
Well, I know, you're going to be speaking with Alan Silverman about that movie that was done about a case in Argentina. That's what is so unique about that case, is that there is no, it's not military. It doesn't have to do with, the CIA or a cover-up or an aircraft carrier or the Pentagon or any of that we like to talk about, in the U.S. It's a case of a young boy, 12-year-old boy, on an isolated farm in a very flat, nondescript part of the country, suddenly being confronted with something completely extraordinary, and there is no explanation. I mean, this was not military, this was not a hoax, this was not any of that, and we were able to document the circumstances extremely well. And what is unique in the whole history of the phenomenon is that we were able to document his life, document what happened to him in the rest of his life.
Right.
And including things that phenomena that continued when he was an adult.
Right. Now, in the area that Juan was located, most likely he had never even heard of any type of situation like that, or
at the time, no. And I have met people from Argentina at a conference, actually in Mexico, and they had invited me to lecture in 5 cities in Argentina, and they said, by the way, you have to lecture in Spanish, which sent me back to my books and made me, relearn enough Spanish so that I could do, a reasonable job of presenting the phenomenon. But then I said, if I do that, I want to spend 1 extra day, have a free day after each lecture in every, as you know, Argentina is a very large country. It's the size of Western Europe. And there were these 5 different regions were very different. And they agreed to let me meet local investigators, UFO investigators, in those different provinces, spending an extra day everywhere before we moved to the next city. And that was extraordinary because, of course, I was exposed to a lot of different phenomena, a lot of different cases that they had already investigated, and this was one of them. And this was in the north of Argentina, in a province called Entre Rios, between the rivers, which is really it's purely an agricultural area. It's very flat, and this happened on an isolated farmhouse, isolated estancia, where this young boy was charged with taking care of the horses, and in the morning he had to round up the herd and bring them close to the farmhouse to feed them and so on. And as he went out, there was a lot of fog over the land, and in the fog was this extraordinary object. Now, I met him 2 years after his experience. So by the time I met him, he was 14. My wife was with me, and my wife was French. She was a child psychologist, and also the school teacher from the school where the child went was with the family. They gathered everybody. So the investigators were there, the family. I met his father, his mother, his siblings, and the school teacher. And my wife had a conversation with the school teacher, and the child was a good student. He wasn't the best student in the class, but he was, very serious, very applied, didn't lie, didn't make up stories. And by the way, when you met his father, who was a true gaucho, that was pretty clear that you wouldn't joke around his father.
I know there's a part in the movie where I think he actually goes to some type of conference or meeting or something like that, and it comes time for him to tell his story, and he just gets super emotional and he just can't do it.
He just breaks down. Yes, the whole movie shows.
Yes.
That's what I know is very powerful, because it shows something that we don't talk about very much in the literature, but the impact on the witness. That this is something that's completely outside their reality, and by the way, it's outside our reality, our everyday reality. And I know just what I saw when I was a kid has stayed with me all my life. It probably motivated me to get into this kind of research. And I know many people who were motivated the same way. And here, Alan contacted me. Alan is a young filmmaker, an artist in Argentina. He contacted me 3 years ago, saying he was working on some other ideas and had met this man who by then was in his late 40s, up in an isolated shack, essentially a cabin up north in Argentina, living essentially alone with his animals, very close to nature, very poor, hiring himself out to local landowners and local farmers to work around the farm. And he had this incredible story, and it was a story that I had published a summary of it in one of my books, in a book called Revelations. And Alan wanted to come to San Francisco and interview me about, what it was like when I met the family and I met this teenager who had that experience. And I said, well, Alan, do you know about the other cases, the same week in the same town? And he said, what other cases? Well, there were 3 other cases by adults, young adults, in the same town of Venado Tuerto, and that I had documented in my report. And I said, well, let's do 2 things. First, I'm going to send you my file, the whole file, which was about 20 or 25 pages, including photographs I had taken at the time and my interview of everybody there. And then I said, if I could come to Buenos Aires, we could close the circle with him. And maybe the encounter with me coming back from his past would help reunite the family, because by then he was ostracized, he was pushed back by the family because his experience was so strange, and also, help him sort of close the circle in his own mind, and it will also help me, because this was very emotional to me, and you'll see that in the movie. I'm not a movie actor, and you can see that I was very, very moved in meeting him again and in revisiting the family, and I think we did a great job of helping him. And I think what you see in the movie is his transformation from, being hunted by this phenomenon, which is still around him, and then emerging from it with much more confidence and so on. And that's really what the movie is all about.
Right. And this dramatic situation that he had at such a young age, I imagine in some ways rather stunted him. And, he becomes emotional quite a few times during the movie. But you're right. You can see a transformation. And I really like when the story focuses on the people. And I think Alan did a very nice job with that. I'd like to quote or paraphrase because I don't know it exactly, but there was a line you said during this movie, such as we see things as kind of a display, an exhibition of images back from like your background of subconscious. That's one of the thoughts you have on what people are seeing. Would you mind explaining that just a little bit? A little bit?
Yes. Well, the book by Dr. Salisbury in Utah, who has done so much. Professor Salisbury wrote a book about the sightings in northern Utah, and he was, of course, a professor of biology at Utah State, and that at the University of Utah, who did really the first very thorough assessment of the sightings there, including the area of the famous ranch, by the way. And his book was called The Utah UFO Display, because the people that he interviewed, both the people from the Mormon population and the Indian population in Utah, were describing something that wasn't so much mechanical. We like to think in terms of technology, like, around the limits and so on. But those things can really display themselves in a whole variety of different things, as if they could paint an image of themselves, and they can look technological one moment and then turn into just a ball of light that goes through a wall. Mm-hmm. And this is not any technology we have, okay? This is that idea of the display is very important, and you have to go beyond the obvious technological interpretations. And before I went so Alan agreed to that I could come to Argentina instead of his coming to San Francisco, and I spent about 10 days there. But before I went there, I relearned enough Spanish so that I could speak one-on-one with Juan. And you'll see that in the movie. There are parts where it's just the two of us together, because I didn't want to get into that aspect of it with an interpreter. I wanted to hear his own words, and I wanted to speak with him in his own language, because it's just so important. And I think that helped us also in closing that circle, that I wanted to be really close, following his emotions. And, I don't cry as easily as he does, but then I haven't had that kind of experience. And but it was obviously very emotional for me as well.
Right. Yes, I was actually pretty impressed with your Spanish. You did pretty well. And I will tell the listener that watching the movie, don't feel it's a hindrance to have this movie because in Spanish, because there is some Spanish with subtitles, but the majority of the movie is actually in English. And it's very easy to follow all the way through. And some interesting people. Did you re-meet any of the people besides Juan when you were there that you had met before?
Well, I was delighted to meet his family again, and it was wonderful to help. That's not in the movie, but to help reunite him in a way emotionally with his family, because the fact that we were there filming his experience, and the fact that I came back and they remembered me. His father and his mother are still alive. Of course, his siblings are now older. They are young adults. So it helped reconnect in a way, reconnect the family, and I could afford to joke with his father, and it was wonderful. It was joyful. just to give you an anecdote, and again, it's not in the movie, but that's part of the human experience. His father has a felt hat, not exactly a cowboy hat, but a gaucho hat.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a picture. I had brought my pictures of the days when I was there, 35 years before, and he had a hat, the same hat. So I told him, Signore, es el mismo sombrero, it's the same hat. And he laughed. And, it was just so nice, that he laughed because it was the same hat. And those are the little things, that you have to spend the time. You have to, and so often in the U.S., when there is an investigation done, a couple of investigators go there, and they go there with a questionnaire, and they fill out the questionnaire with the witness, and it's all very abstract and scientific and logical. But those experiences are not logical. They are not, you have to deal with the emotion, you have to deal with, and then they never go back. And here, what's unique about this is that we have this extended time, and we have the testimony from different people at different times of his life over 40 years. And that is a unique piece of testimony about the whole phenomenon.
Do you think that he would have had a total different life if this didn't happen? I mean, like you mentioned, he's in a very remote area in this cabin, and it looks like, he hunts and everything, for food, and has his animals and gardens and things like that. Do you think, I noticed at the end, he seemed to really enjoy being around, family and in the village at the very end of the movie?
There is no question. He felt estranged from his family. And, so many witnesses go through that, so many witnesses of close encounters. I remember the working with Dr. Hynek and interviewing some of the highway patrol people in the Midwest who had encounters and abductions, and being unable to stay in the police force and having to resign. Lonnie Zamora in Socorro had that experience, being ostracized because he was different. He was a guy who had seen the flying saucer, and professionally that ruined his experience. And many of these people went through divorces. Their neighbors would throw stones at their house. I mean, they would be rejected as, the guy who has done something a little strange and brought disrepute to the family or to the town. So many, I've seen that with so many witnesses, both in Europe, in France, but also in, certainly in the U.S. And that's an aspect of it that nobody has looked at.
Right.
And the first thing that I have to do as when I go to a site is deal with the human situation before you pull out the questionnaire and the compass and the cameras and so on. You have to deal with the people as human beings, and very often they are hurt. They are hurt in their family, they are hurt in their friendships, and in their professions.
Right. Yes. I remember watching some video, some documentary that had taken place in either the early 60s or late 1950s. And there were people talking about their experiences back then. And I remember there was a man that said, if one landed right beside me, I wouldn't tell a soul after what I've gone through. So you're right.
Well, especially in the military, there was an experience in Minnesota, in Minot, the famous Minot case of a B-52 that had an object both on radar and visually, and one member of the crew went to the back of the aircraft in order not to see it. And his buddy said, why don't you want to look at it? And he said, well, I'm interviewing with an airline next week. I don't want to have to say that I've seen a flying saucer.
Wow. Isn't that
He did
amazing?
not want to see it. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So the penalties in some of those, in the military and in the police force, the penalty for seeing something that's unexplained, can be drastic.
And what do you think about now? Do you think things have changed ever since I mentioned earlier, ever since the article came out in the New York Times? People seem to be more acceptable. And I just wanted to get your take on that. I know you have to go in a couple of minutes here, but
I'm okay. Let's wait for Alan. I'd like to say hi to him. We've become, close friends. I wish I could say, yes, things have changed. I'm not so sure. I can tell you things have not changed very much in the scientific community. People are afraid for their reputation. They're afraid for their grants, for their budget. Just almost as much today as they did. There isn't the same stigma, but people still look at you funny. Not so much in Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is so strange anyway,
right.
In many other ways, but in the scientific community in general. And I think that's still true in the military. And I think maybe the Nimitz experience, we've changed things, because so many of these pilots were highly respected and everybody knows they're not lying.
That's right. Yes. I think that's made such headway. And, David Fravor, some people have said a couple things lately since he was on Joe Rogan recently. But I think I think there's absolutely no doubt about the quality of the witness that he is. And
yes.
I think it has definitely made a difference. And I would say I'd say that's one of the top cases, just because of what has happened with that. With it just seems to have moved things forward a bit. And I don't know if you've probably seen things move forward many times in your long career looking into this. And do you have hopes? I don't think there's going to be a disclosure, so to say, but it just seems more acceptable.
What in a way is ironic is the UFO community has said this is great progress because the Navy has requested more testimony, and they are reinstating the reporting. Well, I remember the days working with Dr. Hynek on Project Blue Book files. There were hundreds of reports from the Navy. The Navy had a reporting sequence, reporting regulation that was parallel to JANAP and to the other regulations of the Air Force, and they were reporting into Project Blue Book. The Air Force was the point of contact for all the armed forces. And so I remember going through a number of cases from the Navy when I built a database for Project Blue Book. And then they closed down Project Blue Book, and the Navy went its own way, not gathering those cases anymore. And now they are reinstating the same protocol. That doesn't mean necessarily a recognition of that these things are unexplained. It means a recognition that we want to track, or they want to track those things. It also means they are not going to be made public. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a reverse of what the UFO community is expecting.
Absolutely. Guess what? We have Alan on the line. Alan Silverman, welcome to the show.
Hey, Martin. Thanks for having me. Hey, Jacques. Good afternoon.
Hey, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, ¿y tú?
Bastante bien. Es muy frío aquí in San Francisco.
Yeah, let's just do the rest of the show in Spanish.
That will be fun.
Either Spanish or French.
I'm
okay,
lost on both.
I will let you talk to Alan I know you're eager to talk to him and get his side of the story.
Well, Jacques, I'll tell you, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it because I've been told today that you don't go on too many shows, and it's just I feel really honored, and thank you so much.
Well, this movie is exceptional. So
yes, all right.
And thank you very much.
All right, you take care.
Thank you, Jack.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.